and welcome to yet another edition of Film Seizure at the Movies. I'm Geoff Arbuckle, co-host of the Film Seizure podcast, which you can catch every Wednesday morning at filmseizure.com. You can also catch my show on filmseizure.com called Monster Mondays every Monday afternoon. To figure out when new stuff drops, just follow Film Seizure on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Today, I am talking about Michael Showalter's The Eyes of Tammy Faye, starring Jessica Chastain as Tammy Faye and Andrew Garfield as the Reverend Jim Bakker. Now, to be honest with you, I really couldn't wait to see this movie. I saw a trailer for it back when The Green Knight came out, and I knew I needed to get my eyeballs on this as soon as possible. But why? What exactly is it about Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker that tickles such interest in me? Well, there's kind of a three-pronged approach that I take with my fascination with the Bakkers. First, Jim Bakker is still out there grifting poor, old, deeply religious people today. Anytime Vic Berger makes a new video on YouTube about something Jim is hawking, like his doomsday prepping food buckets or Donald Trump or whatever, I'm watching it. Jim is just a goofy idiot. Second, I'm old enough to remember the scandals with televangelists. It maybe shaped more of my view of organized religion than anything else. There are a lot of bad people trying to sell you on a lot of bad ideas and trying to dress it up as religion. Whether it's Jerry Falwell or Jimmy Swaggart or Jim Bakker, they want your money and they prefer it is sent to them monthly. It's a bad look for religion in America, and it really hurt people who couldn't afford what they were selling. Not to mention, it really hurt other people that they were kind of coming out against. Thirdly, there's this odd, twisted nostalgia that I have for televangelism and for what it looked like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You have these sets that are intended to look like living rooms or church studies or dens or something, and everything looks like it's covered with teddy bear fur. Everything from the floor to the couches to the shelves to the walls look like it's plush or carpeted. It's just simply a facade, and that's an excellent way to describe it all. You have these older white people in very outdated suits and dresses and hairstyles telling you what is good and watch out for the tricks of the devil on a stage that is absolutely meant to trick people into thinking you're in some sort of a comfort zone with them. It's all very fascinating to me. So when I saw this trailer, I was absolutely in. I watched the documentary that writer Abe Sylvia based this movie on, and it's a very quirky documentary. It came out in 2000, and it's narrated by RuPaul. And the reason for that is actually somewhat interesting because you can tie Tammy Faye's outrageous makeup and style to drag queens and her openness to be friends and provide Christian love to those in the LGBTQ community. The documentary doesn't even hit 80 minutes in runtime, but it paints this picture of Tammy Faye possibly being a sympathetic character. Does she truly not know what things Jim might have been up to behind the scenes to raise money for their PTL network? Does she only do that old-timey Christian stand by your man sort of support and therefore is aware of his duplicitous nature and schemes? Was she simply kind of a, well, for a lack of a better word, bimbo? The documentary doesn't really give you anything to judge fully on. Besides, Tammy Faye isn't going to provide you that answer directly. You kind of have to draw your own conclusions. So now, 21 years later, we have a dramatization of that documentary. The movie does fairly well with capturing the broader strokes of the documentary. There are a few places of note that the film decides to go deeper into than what the documentary did. On the broader strokes, you have Tammy Faye's Betty Boop-like persona and almost never say die attitude. She's incredibly upbeat and seems to never turn down the opportunity to take a lemon and try to squeeze lemonade out of it. We see the Bakers bounce from the Christian Broadcasting Network to their own venture as they seemingly got forced out by Pat Robertson, which leads to them forming the Praise the Lord network that eventually goes worldwide with the help of satellites. They were, I think, the first worldwide Christian television network. So that's where the majority of this movie lies, in the 70s and 80s with PTL. The movie decides to do something the documentary couldn't or wouldn't, and that's expose some of the more strife that the Bakers had to deal with. Jim is almost immediately portrayed as something of a loser and somewhat of a manipulator. He wins Tammy's heart by telling a sad story of him getting a boner with his girlfriend as they listened to Fats Domino that led to him nearly killing a young boy with his car. We then find out that he takes a loan to get a nice car for them to do their traveling ministries, and seemingly never makes a payment on it, and that ends up stranding them in a town several states away from their original home in Minnesota. He's captured by the idea of material wealth through the gospel, like what Pat Robertson did for himself. He later turns that around on Tammy Faye and all but blames her for their money troubles. The movie also delves into two other things that were somewhat unclear in the documentary. The first is Jim's relationship with one Jerry Falwell. Based on what I knew was that Falwell seemingly muscled PTL away from Jim Baker when Jim's affair with Jessica Hahn was exposed. Falwell sweet-talked him into giving control over to him, only to eventually kick the Bakers all the way out in a move that feels very villainous. In the movie, it seems it was long calculated as far as taking over a decade to rid himself from the Bakers. The other thing that we get a little bit more dramatization of is Jim Baker's possible homosexual leanings, but probably smartly, it's kind of left a little vague beyond a couple of mentions and a single scene of suspicious behavior with Jim's right-hand man. What's very clear in this movie is that the movie uses a campy lens to tell the story of Tammy Faye. Again, it's hard to tell exactly what Tammy Faye was. She is the protagonist in this movie, and it's clear that Jim Baker, Tammy's mother, and Falwell were all set up as antagonists. As I said, Jim is portrayed as a complete idiot in terms of handling money. He wants the wealth but has no idea how to pay for that wealth. But was Tammy Faye really guilty of those things too? Was she just as greedy, or was she really not able to see that her wealth was kind of incongruous with what most people would consider piety or true Christian values? Tammy's mother, Rachel, is also a great character in this movie, while not being a kind woman and really kind of being a villain for most of the movie, does seem to try to say as much about how the Bakers use their pledges to the ministry. But it seems to almost kind of go all the way over Tammy's head whenever it's brought up. And that really makes this Jessica Chastain's movie. She's at times unrecognizable. The movie takes painstaking measures to recreate real moments captured on TV. And yeah, Chastain is all the way in with her performance. It's over the top while also being very subtle at times. For as good as Vincent D'Onofrio is as this imposing figure that the movie builds Jerry Falwell up to being, he's literally shown as, and is actually maybe even kind of referred to as, a fat cat in this. Or as good as Garfield is as Jim Baker, neither can come close to Chastain as Tammy Faye. I think she does enough I think she should get considered at least for a nomination for Best Actress for this movie. She nails the little ticks of Tammy Faye. There are these little nervous chuckles that Tammy Faye always had, or her kind of glowing expressions of looking for acceptance that Chastain just gets time and again in this movie. By the end of the movie, you're kind of left to forget that you're actually seeing an actress who has a completely other recognizable look of her own playing this character that, you really kind of start thinking, wow, I'm really actually watching Tammy Faye Bakker. She also handles the subtle stuff pretty well too. After she meets and marries Jim Bakker and they start having success with their show, she starts to subtly focus more on herself in the mirror. She's less interested in Jim's endeavors, but there is a notable and noticeable rift that seems kind of irreconcilable anyway. As she asserts herself more as a powerful partner in PTL, there is this pushback that affects her. She doesn't really understand why Jim gets to have the conversations with the other men like Robertson or Falwell or Jimmy Swaggart, when she is every bit as part of their sermon as he is. There are little things that she does in her expression or her questioning of what Falwell's agenda is, and why can't they just separate themselves from government, that are just excellent in this movie. It's those little things that may ring somewhat more true than we might assume. Jamie Bakker, for example, which is Jim and Tammy Faye's son, is also a pastor, but is more welcoming to the LGBTQ community and wishes to remain out of government and politics. It's likely that he picked that up from his mother. Now, in the end, this movie is good, but it also has to walk a very fine line. It uses camp to make this side of Christianity in America something that you can kind of chuckle at. However, it doesn't want to make fun of religion or push too hard on either of the Bakkers. It certainly doesn't want to make fun of Tammy Faye, but on the other side, it has to make sure it doesn't come across as too much of a Christian film either. It has condemnations to make of some of these characters, but it also doesn't want to offend the religious people who may be sympathetic to the Bakkers or watched them back in the 80s. I don't imagine too many of Jim's current viewers want to watch this movie and probably will view it as somewhat of an affront to them. Now, that said, the positives of this movie lie in the performances and absolutely with Jessica Chastain. There are some, there are some things there for the unreligious like me to chuckle at. But those fine lines that this movie has to traipse is something that at times I feel kind of get in the way of this movie. It could really twist the dagger in how religion since the days of the formation of the moral majority has tainted the political landscape and makes honest, good faith discourse almost impossible in this country. But it refrains from doing that. The best we get is that Jerry Falwell is a bad man, and it goes no deeper than that very thin depth. All in all, if you have that same fascination with those old televangelists and the golden age of TV religion that I do, then you'll probably find enough in this movie, at least in the casting, to like this movie. If you want this to be a damning referendum on how religion has taken over a lot of the discourse in this country, some 35 or 40 years since those golden days, this movie is likely not really work for you, at least on the same level. You'll still like those performances, I suspect. However, if you want to make a pledge so that I can build myself a television empire and a theme park, well, I'm here to say, good folks, that those phone lines are indeed open. But that does it for this edition of Film Seizure at the Movies. Catch Film Seizure on Wednesdays with myself and my co-hosts Chuck Moore and Jason Oliver. And you can also catch my show Monster Mondays at filmseizure.com. You can also find our podcast in several places, and you can just go to our website to find all the places that the show can be found so that you can subscribe at your favorite podcast provider. You can follow us at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram by searching for Film Seizure. And I'll definitely be back in a few weeks for the final outing of Daniel Craig as James Bond in No Time to Die. But until then, don't forget to save me the aisle seat.